As you may know, the Harley Davidsons have a rear wheel fork alignment issue. And when the fork is out of alignment, the rear wheel is not vertical, and that affects the handling of the bike. So in this particular video, I'm going to design my own adjustable link so I can adjust the rear fork by moving the engine vertically. And that's what this video is about. I decided to make my own adjusting link because I couldn't find anybody selling an adjustable link for the Sportster. This is a 2011 Sportster. And I ordered a couple of them, none of them fit. So I had to make my own. As it turns out, the 3/8 inch bolts, American bolt threads, fit everything just fine. So I had to grind the stamping off the head to get a smooth head so that when I welded the nuts, it would have a flat surface to seat upon. Next, I threaded two 3/8 inch nuts onto a separate bolt for alignment. Then I clamped the assembly as shown here so I could weld the two nuts to the head of the boat that's pointing up. Then I repeated this procedure to make the other assembly, and here you can see both assemblies side by side. Then I simply screwed the bolt between the two nuts, screwed that out, and drilled out the nuts to the next drill size below 3/8. Then I had to move the assembly up and down on the drill bit to make it enough to get in the 3/8 bolts, which mount to the bike. Here you can see the two bolt assemblies threaded into a 3/8 nut coupling nut, and there's also a lock nut on each side. You may have noticed that I didn't weld all the way around the bolt head when I welded the two nuts to the bolt. And the reason I didn't is because the two nuts stacked are the same height as the insert on the original fixed link, so I don't want to disturb this height. They're the same now. So what we have now is an adjustable coupler. It has two disadvantages though. The first disadvantage is that because these are both right-hand threaded bolts, you can't just turn the center coupling nut to adjust the spacing. Instead, you have to take one end loose, flip one end 180 degrees, and put it back down. That gives you the minimum amount of adjustment available. Notice in this picture that the 3/8 bolts going through the link and through my adapter look like they're tilted in at the top, but they're not. That's a camera view of it. The camera distorts it slightly. However, the one end is slightly not perpendicular to the length of the adjusting bolt threads. And that turned out to be an advantage. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I screwed these two together to get the exact spacing of the link, and now I'm going to turn it a half a turn and install it. Then I know how much that changed. My original reading, the original reading was off 1/8 of an inch between the two sides. That is the left side of the bike. The dimension was 1/8 of an inch longer than the right side of the bike at the shocks. So that meant that the top of the engine has to tilt towards the right side of the bike to bring these forks in line so that they're the same distance on each side where the shocks mount. The second disadvantage is that you have to remove the right-hand bolt here, the 4 bolt in the foreground picture here. You have to remove that bolt, make your adjustment by flipping that end of the assembly 180 degrees at a time. Then you have to take a wooden stick to pry the engine so that this hole lines up after the new adjustment. That way you can get the thread started by dropping the 4 bolt here down through the threads that are attached to the engine mount. So that's the second problem with it. Notice that the original link had a swivel joint at each end. That's due to engine possible misalignment. As shown in this picture, the engine mount may not necessarily be at the height of the bottom segment of the frame mount for this link. That's why there's a swivel in the link at each end. So if there's any misalignment of the engine up either too high or too low, the swivels can take care of that. In my case, I don't have swivels. Fortunately for me, my welded ends and my engine mounts all lined up pretty much within a 1/16 of an inch. So I just went ahead and tightened down the bolts on each end to secure the link to the engine bracket and the frame bracket. Notice in this picture the far end of the link has a bracket with a strap above and below the link. So this bolt cannot be leaned at all. It has to be perfectly aligned. Whereas the foremost bolt here, which is the right side of the bike, that bolt just has a strap on one end. So therefore that bolt can be slightly out of alignment with no issues. A more precise way of welding these nuts would be as follows. Notice in this picture that if you remove the link, the original link, and don't disturb the ball joints in each end of the link, just pull the fastening bolts out, pull the link, keep track of which is the left end, which is the top of the link. For the right hand nut assembly, you weld the nuts as I did previously, making sure that the bolt going through the nuts is exactly perpendicular to the bolt, which adjusts the length of the link. By doing that, then this end of the link will have the same angle to the engine, no matter if it's foot 180 or back the other 180. Now assemble the link as shown here and pass the bolts through both ends of the link. And now you have the proper alignment to weld the left side of the link assembly to get the proper angle that's required for that bolt. So there you have it. This is my homemade Harley Sportster engine tilt adjusting assembly.